Hello, guys, gals, non-binary pals, and waterfowls. It's Big Mike, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Coffee with Big Mike, the series where I sit down for a chat with some rather interesting and amazing people over a nice cup of coffee. And fam, do we have a special show for you today. Joining us today is not only one of my favorite VTubers and a soon-to-be published author, but someone I consider a great friend, the ever-gifted Lewd Librarian, BlackChaiSenpai. Welcome, BlackChaiSenpai. How are you today?
I'm doing all right. Happy to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And, we actually planned to do this for a while. Unfortunately, technical issues got in the way. We'd actually planned to do this, I want to say maybe February, March, but we had to postpone it for about 2 months or so. But regardless, it's a pleasure to finally have you here.
I'm definitely excited to finally be here because it has definitely been a couple months.
And for my audience who may not be familiar with you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
It's always so weird. Maybe it's just me. I always find it weird to talk about myself, but I will make a valiant effort. I am a lewd librarian, as you stated, and basically what that entails is everything. About 90% of what I do is based around books that I've read, books that I want to read, and trying to convince people that reading as an adult is a lot cooler than a lot of people probably think it is. Because you do get a lot of grief when you tell people your hobby is reading as an adult, and I don't understand it. But I do love reading, and the lewd part of it mostly comes from the fact that a lot of the books I read are those, Fabio on the cover, your mom doesn't want you to find her reading stash kind of books. That's just kind of what it is.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Everybody has different interests. And I would say I agree with you 100% in regards to reading as an adult. Reading is one of my hobbies, one of my top hobbies, I should say. I try to make an hour out of my day every day and set it aside for reading. And sometimes when I tell people about that, I either get one or two responses. Either they're like, "Oh, wow, you must be really smart," or "Oh, wow, you must be really boring as a person." And I'm like, wow,
yes.
Why? I don't get that.
There is no in between. It's one or the other.
And particularly, I would say those books tend to those books that you talked about, the Fabio, on the cover. They tend to have an even worse reputation, but I'm like, dude, what's the point of knocking somebody's interest? What's the point of knocking somebody's hobby? Especially when it comes to reading, so few people in our day and age enjoy reading. How can you knock somebody who reads something? And there's a whole adage about not judging a book by its cover. And even though I've never read one of those books, I will refrain from judging one of those books because, you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. And that's something I wholeheartedly believe in. But as a teacher myself, I believe anything that gets somebody to read, it works in my book, I would say. And now, but I want to talk to you about literature and reading, and it's something I'm very passionate about. It's something you're very passionate about. But before we get too far into that, I want to kind of talk a bit about some of your other general hobbies and stuff. One of which being streaming. You're a streamer, correct?
Yes, when I can, but I do like streaming.
And what kind of streams?
Streaming. Oh, you're fine. Definitely more of a whatever game I currently have installed kind of thing. Streaming is more of on the back burner for me. Mostly, it's not that I don't enjoy it, I really do. It's just, I have more fun doing my book videos. But I do like popping on for a couple of hours, engaging with chat, and just having a good time. It's just currently not my priority.
I can definitely tell you put a lot of passion. You put a lot of hard work into your book videos.
I try.
My favorite videos you make was that series you did. We're talking about the books you read when you were in school, and if they were appropriate or not appropriate. I absolutely love that series. I probably watched it a couple times. The whole thing through, or the whole thing so far through, I should say. Really fantastic series. Now speaking,
Thank you.
You're very welcome. You're very, very, very welcome. But again, I'm going to try to keep myself from getting too far into the whole literature thing at the moment. But back to streaming games. You said you like to stream whatever game you're playing at the moment. What are some games that you like to play?
So I'm not a AAA gamer. I'm more of like I like smaller, more indie type games. I'm currently working through Crash Bandicoot though, and that has been a struggle and a half. That game is so hard for no reason. But I definitely am not a big fan of like the bigger games. I occasionally play a big game, but like more like Watch Dogs 2, like the third person semi-open world type of thing. But I don't play like first person shooters like Halo and stuff. That's just not for me.
This might be a difficult follow-up question, but if you had to choose one game as your favorite, which one do you think is your favorite?
GTA San Andreas.
I think that's a good choice.
I think that was one of the first games I ever played as a kid, in addition to like the original Crash Bandicoot and Spyro. But like back on the PlayStation 2, I remember I have vivid childhood memories of being entirely too young to be playing GTA San Andreas. Like I think I'm like 8-ish years old playing San Andreas and just living my life. It was great.
I had a similar experience. I was in high school when the game came out. I was in high school when it came out, so a lot of my friends were playing it. But at the time, somebody I knew let their 5 or 6 year old play it. Oh no, I'm sorry, it wasn't San Andreas. I'm sorry. It was what's it called? Saints Row. And I don't know if you ever played Saints Row or not. But there is this one thing. There's this one weapon you can use in Saints Row. It's like a how can I put this politely? It's a pink marital aid. There we go. And I'm just sitting here watching this 6-year-old just go to town, just bludgeon people with this pink marital aid, and I'm like, wow, really? Oh, really? But yeah, it's crazy how that works out. But back to San Andreas. I'm sorry.
I hid my playing of it. Like my mom didn't know that I was playing it. Like I had to hide it. So she didn't let me do anything. I had to sneak it in.
I did that with Duke Nukem.
Oh, Duke Nukem.
When me and my cousin, my cousin was older than me. He was like, I want to say, he was like 14, 15 when I was like 5 or 6. So, but he wasn't supposed to be playing that game either, because we were kind of from I won't say we were from a too religious family, but we're from a considerably religious family. And we weren't supposed to be playing that game because there was a lot of bad press at the time. There's this one point in one of the Duke Nukem games where Duke's in an arcade, and there's an arcade game of the previous Duke Nukem game. If you go up to it, Duke says the line, "I don't have any time to play with myself," and a lot of other one-liners like that and stuff. So it got really bad press, and so we were forbidden to play that, but we did anyway, which I think added to the fun. Doing something you shouldn't do as a kid, but you sneak around and do it anyway. I think it kind of adds to it. But I did enjoy San Andreas. I have a weird relationship with that game, because I've never actually played it myself, but I watched other people play it. I was always a hardcore Nintendo fanboy, or at least I was always a hardcore Nintendo fanboy after Sega's demise. so I never really got into the PlayStation.
Oh, the Sega.
But everybody else in my family, my brothers, my cousins, they all preferred PlayStation. But I would watch them play, and as I got older and as the internet became more developed, one thing that really grabbed my attention was the lore surrounding that game, like the urban legends, like Bigfoot living in the woods, there's a chainsaw man in the woods, stuff like that really caught my attention.
I think what drew me to the game, and I'm not going to dive too deep into it because it's kind of sad, but am kind of from an area sort of like where the game's based. So I guess in like some ways it hit a little close to home. But at the same time, I could also act an entire menace and get away with it. So it was like close to home, but also like had that level of detachment because I could R1, L2 and get a rocket launcher. Like,
I completely understand. I'm not from a big urban center myself, but a lot of the stuff that happens in my hometown, just a small town of 15,000 people, will be right at home in a GTA game, I would say. So it was interesting to see how you could, if you're wanted by the police, you can put the code in and make all your stars disappear. Have unlimited ammo, unlimited guns, and I think there's a certain appeal, at least at that time, for a sandbox game like that. How you could go anywhere, do anything.
Oh yeah, definitely. And even with the it was awful, but the remake that they did or the reboot, something they did with the most recent trilogy, you could still use like 90% of the same cheats for the game. So it just was even more chaotic because that game was butchered by what they did to it. But it was nice to still have it and use the cheats and act a menace.
Now, one more thing, and then we'll move on.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? What do you think the most outlandish thing you ever did in GTA was?
So I remember this was back on the PlayStation 2 when they had the same screen co-op. Me and a friend. In hindsight, it's kind of obvious what I was doing, but me and another girlfriend of mine used to play the game together, and you could pick the character you wanted to be. So I would always pick one of the generic like hooker characters to be every time. And I would be like, well, since you're a girl and I'm still a girl, this is happening. And like you could basically romance each other in the PlayStation 2 version if you were doing like the same screen co-op. And when you're like that young, that seems really outlandish. Like, yeah, you could stand on a church and like shoot down helicopters with a rocket launcher, but that's just GTA. That's common practice. But the budding gay awakening is definitely way more outlandish.
I never knew that was possible, actually. I never knew that was possible. I can't remember which game it was, but it was one of the earlier games. I would say either San Andreas or before San Andreas, where you could go pick up a prostitute and you could take her into like an alley, and then the car would start moving up and down, and so
you could do that in San Andreas. I think that was all the GTA games. Like I think you knew that in all of them.
And so many people
were
pissed off over that, and I can only imagine how they would have reacted to, how they would have reacted to that whole situation. Which I think it's kind of, in hindsight, it's in today's world, it's something completely normal. But back then, early 2000s, completely different landscape. People were much more uptight, and thank God we've come a long way since then, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or at least I hope we have.
I like to believe we have, but it's also kind of funny to imagine people. Could you imagine like people seeing GTA 5? Like the shit you can do in GTA 5? Imagine going back to when GTA San Andreas came out and seeing how mad people would get. That would be hilarious.
You know, video game history is filled with a lot of really, really questionable sexual stuff. Um,
Yep.
really, really, and I don't really want to get too far into that because um, there's some really, really out there stuff. On consoles you wouldn't even imagine either. Like on the Atari, for example, one of the Atari systems had a whole
Oh
line of
yeah.
sex party games. Like there was this one particular game where it was supposed to be played at a bachelorette party, where female players would control women walking around the street, and there would be a computer or CPU player gentleman at the top relieving himself, and the the human players would try to catch it in their mouths, and I was like, oh wow, that's because the further back you go, you figure things be more conservative, right? Because as society progressed, we've loosened up a lot in our artistic expression, for the good, for the better, I like to think. But in the '80s, you wouldn't expect to see something like that on a console, but lo and behold.
Right.
And now speaking of media that sometimes likes to push boundaries, do you like anime?
Yes, I do. I do. I
What
do
kind
a lot.
what kind of anime are you into?
Mhm. I think it's kind of a reflection of my taste in books now that I'm kind of thinking about it. But I definitely think I like the more psychological ones, like Psychopaths. And I do also kind of like the more romance heavy ones as well. Because sometimes just sitting down to watch a nice, like, 10, 15 episode romance anime, it, it's a nice way to spend an afternoon. But, like, I also really like the deep crime, horror, psychological ones, like Psychopaths, Tokyo Ghoul, Shiki, I think it's called. It's about vampires, really good.
I think I think those are some really good choices. I would describe my taste in a similar manner. My taste in anime tends to reflect a lot of my interests as well. Like for example, I love a lot of technology anime or tech centered anime. There's this really great anime from the late '90s called Serial Experiments Lane. There's a huge
Ooh.
psychological twist to it as well. There's cults and such. I don't want to give too much away if it's something you want to watch later, but I'd highly recommend it. Um, for anime of its time, some of the technology is a bit dated, but it's also surprising to go back and see just all the things, not just the technology, but the concepts in society about the future they got right. Um, I like a lot of romance anime as well. Not my proudest moment, Black Chai, but a lot of times, some of these romance animes will have me sobbing like a 200-pound baby. I remember the first time I watched an anime called Clannad. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. Um,
Heard of it. I haven't seen it.
had me sobbing like a baby. And then there was one called, well, before that, there was one called Air. Another great one as well. Um, but my taste in anime tends to be a lot of harem anime. And maybe you're thinking, oh, Michael, you fantasize about having more than one woman, don't you? Huh? Now, nah, that's not really like that,
The
man.
Tengen approach.
Well, I'm very much into visual novels and making visual novels myself. And for some reason, a lot of visual novels, or maybe the majority of them, tend to be harem based. I'm not quite sure why that is. Now, there are many good exceptions, like Phoenix Wright, for example, um, but for the most part, they tend to harem visual novels tend to dominate the
Yeah.
scene. And so I started watching in the beginning, at least, to kind of better understand the storytelling. Because as a writer, you know, I wanted to familiarize myself with the genre. Are you a fan of visual novels?
Yes, it really does depend with me because I do like sappy stories, but they have to be interesting sappy stories. Like like it can be sappy, but if it's boring, I'm gonna lose interest very quickly. So, I have one that I got from Steam that I'm thinking about playing that looks kind of good. I don't hate them. I don't prefer to play them on like stream or anything because I cannot sit here and read all those lines like that. There is one that I am playing right now though that's actually mostly voiced, but I've been playing it. I've been using it as the background video or the background gameplay in my videos recently. And it's a queer inclusive visual novel that's a fantasy murder mystery. And it's that one's really interesting because it's got everything you could ever want. It's got your choice of gender preferences to romance, including non-binary. Love that. You get to pick your pronouns for your character. And it's a murder mystery. And who doesn't love a good murder mystery?
It does look like a really interesting visual novel, I would say. It does look like a really interesting one. I've never played it myself, but I haven't watched your videos. I've seen it in the background. But I had no idea, it was designed like that. I think that's really innovative, and that actually is one of the things that really draws my attention to a visual novel. Is the manner in which it innovates the genre. The genre is one that's kind of oversaturated, but there are some breakout titles that do things really differently. Like one good example would be Doki Doki Literature Club. It takes
Oh no.
it takes the whole genre, what you expect, and it turns it upside down. It subverts it. And for me, I'm really inspired by this, but it leaves me in a conundrum. On the one hand, I can take inspiration from this, but there's no way I could use that inspiration without coming off as being derivative. On the other hand, because of that benchmark, because of how popular it is, you can't really even if you could find a way and to not be derivative with it, people are going to be a bit uneasy going forward for the next few years playing a new visual novel. So that element of surprise isn't really there, or wouldn't really be there like it was with DDLC. So I take it you have some history with DDLC.
I didn't play it. I was one of those people that was really heavy into watching like Mark and Jack Septiceye play games, and it was just something like I didn't used to really watch TV too much. I used to just watch YouTube Let's Plays, and I saw a cute little thumbnail for I think it was Mark playing Doki Doki Literature Club, and I think the title was very clickbaity, and I ended up watching it, and I'm a binger. Like his whole thing for it was out, so I spent the whole day just watching it, and I was just like, I am never going to be the same. Like, what? Like, I can't play, I don't do horror good myself. Like, I can't really play horror because I will get scared, I will pause the game, and I will shut down my computer. But I can watch it because I'm not controlling it. So it really did freak me out. I was not ready.
Yeah, I watched a couple videos about it in passing. About a year or so before I played it. My favorite YouTuber, some ordinary gamers, he played it. In my daytime work, one of my jobs I work is filled with busy work. So what I tend to do is open a YouTube tab, open YouTube in one tab and do my work in another tab. So I wasn't really watching, but I was listening along. It just sounded really crazy. But when it comes to horror games, I'm not into the horror genre at all. It's not really my thing. However, I had kind of an interesting experience around 2011, 2012. I don't know if you ever played Slender the 8 Pages.
Oh God, yeah.
But yeah, I kind of had a similar experience to you. I was like, you know what? fuck this, I'm done. And I still have yet to beat that game. Maybe I might try it one day soon.
Very quickly.
But I would say,
It's just.
oh, sorry.
Oh, you're fine. Go ahead.
Oh no, you. Oh, please continue. Please continue.
It's like I think I remember playing that with like a group of friends who still thought creepypastas were like edgy because I mean it's 2011. Creepypastas are edgy, and they were like, "Let's play the Slenderman game," and I was like, let's not do that." But because I had the biggest TV, everyone piled into my house to make me to like play this, and I gave up within 2 seconds because I heard a twig snap, and I was like, we're not doing this.
Ooh. So, a bit of interesting side story. So when I first started playing, me and my two best friends, we were sitting around at night. At the time, well, first off, I'm from a rural area in North Carolina. At the time, I lived out in the county. And we were sitting around. It was late September, early October, playing Slender the 8 Pages. And my 15, 16-year-old sister at the time had this adorable little puppy, and somehow or another he had gotten out. My sister she's scared of the dark. She doesn't like to go outside. She scares very easy. So I'm like, okay, I'll go out and look for it. And then one of our neighbors said, oh, I think he may have went into the woods. Now, I just got done playing Slender, the 8 Pages, and I was like, oh, well, I guess I'm going into the woods. And so I'm out walking in the woods, and man, it was the most surreal feeling ever. It's like I'm constantly on edge. I'm looking around me like I owe somebody money and they're coming to beat my ass or worse because I owe them money. And I spent about a good 5-10 minutes, and I'm like, you know what? I can't do this. I'm out of here. I chuck up my deuces. I walk back to the house, and lo and behold, the dog's at the house. But really, I don't think I've ever been on edge. And I walk through the woods hundreds of times during the day because I used to love hiking back when I lived in the States. But I don't remember any walk through the woods as vividly as I remember that night. And
yeah, that could absolutely never be me.
I still to this day I can tell you why I did it. But I went through for it. I guess as a big brother, you kind of have that responsibility.
See, I'm a big sister, and I would still never like if someone or my dog were to make the executive decision to run outside in the middle of the night. That's a them problem. I'm not going. But yet again, the area I grew up in, it wasn't safe to do so regardless. So I guess maybe that's just me. And even though I've moved several towns away from my hometown, I still kind of live in that mentality of I should not go anywhere at night.
Oh, where I'm from, definitely in the city, you definitely do not want to go out at night. Definitely in the city. It's not a very safe place at all. In fact, some of the police that work in my hometown, they said they felt safer in Iraq when they served a couple tours of duty in Iraq than they did working in my hometown. And as a civilian, I'm like, oh wow. But
oh gosh, I would move. Like that would be the cue to leave immediately.
Oh, as soon as I got my money together, that's exactly what I did. That's exactly what I did. That's one of the reasons why I relocated to the other side of the planet. And because I just didn't feel safe. You know, it was a struggle. You know, you never know if you're gonna come back alive when you go out to work in the morning. And not only did I not want to live in that situation, I didn't really want my children to live in that situation. I didn't want to start a family in that situation, I should say, because I didn't have children at the time. So.
I wholeheartedly agree with you because I'm in my mid-20s, so I get asked by family members a lot, you know, when am I gonna have kids? And I'm always like, when I don't live in the country, when I am able to move the hell out of this country, because it doesn't feel safe for me. So I'm gonna start. So I signed up for Duolingo French lessons, and I'm gonna go to Canada.
I can tell you. I can tell you. If you ever studied at a university, well, even if you haven't studied at a university, you can still possibly do this. But haven't studied at a university, if you have a bachelor's degree, and the subject doesn't matter. But as long as you have a bachelor's degree, you could teach English. Now, not having one won't make it impossible, but it would make it a bit more difficult. But because you're a native speaker, you could have that option available to you. And being someone that loves literature, I think that would be a really good fit. If that's something you'd ever want to
Aggressively
consider
taking
doing.
notes.
Um, but and yeah, so many people actually they worked their way around the world. Like I had a good friend of mine. He's taught English in Japan, South Korea, Indonesia, Thailand, China, and he's currently in India now. And
Oh wow.
yeah, and that's kind of what I wanted to do originally as well. But well, yeah, life happens and such, and but I'm happy with the way things turned out. I would say, but yeah, it's definitely something. It's definitely something if you want to travel, if you're looking to live abroad, it's definitely a viable option. I would
Oh yeah.
say. Um, Now, I think this would make a great time to segue into the real meat and
Mhm.
potatoes of this what we've been talking about. Now, literature makes up a sizable amount of your content, and anyone who knows you are a total bibliophile, to put it lightly. But why is literature so important to you?
um, because to keep a very long, depressing story short, I didn't necessarily have the best childhood growing up, and the only, I guess, outlet or piece I had from that was walking to my local library. So I would spend most of my days after school and literally every day during summer breaks at my local library, and I would just walk there like every day and sit in the same specific window every day for like over a decade.
I can re-
And it's just the way it's always been.
to be honest, I wasn't always into literature. I didn't really like reading so much. I was always good at it. Well, I wasn't always good at it, but um, actually, I when I was in elementary school, I was held back a grade because I didn't know how to read. But from that point on, I actually, when I was in eighth grade, I was reading at a university level. Um, so it was something I was good at, but I wasn't really so much interested in outside of school. And then I remember I was in 11th grade, and I was in English class, and I read this one work that really changed my life. It was Ralph Waldo Emerson's Self-Reliance, and that had a dramatic impact on the way I viewed life and the way I viewed the world. And it kind of, I would say, it helped me to transition from a teenage boy to an adult man. It really helped me to grow up. Um, and after and in university, I started to fall more in love with reading. It was a hobby. It was a really big hobby for me. But once I graduated from university, things got a bit dark and depressing for me. Um, and I had to return home. I was a bit too optimistic about my ability to find a job right out the gate. And it took a while. It took about 6 months. I was unemployed 6 months after returning home. And the reality I returned home to wasn't a good one. As I told you, my town's not a very safe place. There's a lot of family issues I had going on. We were homeless a couple times during that period as well. And so literature became my refuge. I would keep my nose in the books pretty much from the time I woke up to the time I went to bed. Of course, when I wasn't looking for a job. And so I can kind of relate to what you say. How you say, reading got you through a difficult part in your life. How you took refuge in it. And I think that's one of the amazing things about literature. Now, this might be a difficult question to ask, but do you remember the first book you ever read?
If I had to guess, I would say the Junie B. Jones books. I think that's what they're called.
I believe that's correct. Junie B. Jones, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, Junie B. Jones. It was either that or I remember reading the first volume of Inuyasha when I was super young. Because you could rent manga from the library I spent all my time at.
I say you have a great
And
taste.
so I remember watching Inuyasha first and then going to the library and seeing it there, and I was like, what? And I think that was the first time I learned that you can take manga or books and turn them into TVs and shows. But yeah, I think I read those maybe around the same time. I don't know which one came first.
I have a hard time. In fact, I don't think I could remember the first book I ever read, but the earliest one I remember, there was a book by Mark Brown. He's the same guy behind the Arthur series. He did another book called Dinosaurs Travel from Place to Place. Like the art style is the same and everything as the Arthur series, but instead of aardvarks and bunnies and such as dinosaurs. It's pretty much tips for kids on how to travel and stuff. And now that I think about it, I never really thought about this before into this conversation, but maybe that's where my interest in traveling kind of stems from. Now another very difficult question, and I do apologize for asking you so many hard questions.
No, you're good. Let's do it.
Now, out of all the books you've read over the course of your life, which one do you think was the most influential to you?
Okay, I'm gonna give you two answers for two different reasons. Um, so if you want to talk seriously in term like influenced my life in a more positive-ish note, I'm going to say it is The Help. Because like I mentioned in that video I made about it, I read The Help at a pivotal moment in my life. I was 18 and the school I was at was actually extremely racist, but they'll deny it to the day they die that they weren't. And, reading a book about like that heavily about race when I am biracial, I don't know, it's just like reading a book about people who were in obviously way more intense situations, but being as I'm also black and dealing with racist situations at that moment, reading them overcome what happened to them, I was like, oh lordy, I can get through anything. And oh, I love that book so much. So that's definitely influential in terms of like a good help me realize, it's okay to be black, which, when you've experienced racism your whole life, you kind of get this internal hatred of yourself. And I think reading that and then almost immediately after leaving that school helped a lot. So that's the sad answer. And I have a goofy answer. In terms of funny influential to me, I'm gonna say the book 44 Chapters About Four Men was was pretty influential to me. And I say that because the book was so atrocious that Netflix turned it into a show.
Uh-oh.
And when I started watching it, I was like, I have to complain about this. And that's when I started making videos. So that's how that happened, and I'm actually currently in the process of remaking those videos because now that I have a flow going, I no longer like watching the struggle that was my first few videos. But yeah, that book inspired me to make videos about complaining.
You know, it's interesting. I was talking to somebody the other day about being a content creator, and one sign that was brought up that you're growing as one is that you look back at your older content or your first content, and you're kind of like, ew, that was me. Because as time passes, we get better, or we improve, and so I think it's really interesting. But when you said Netflix made a series about it, I was like, oh wow.
Yeah, I know. I have a lot of work to do because I have to remake 8 videos, and season 2 is suspected to drop next month. And I'm still working on 365 days too. Like, making book videos is relatively easy. When you're doing the book versus the Netflix, it's so much harder because then you're fighting with Netflix about copyright, and you're also working with anywhere between 45-minute episodes, or what I'm currently dealing with is a 2-hour movie that I have to edit down to make the YouTube gods happy.
That's something I'm a bit curious with myself as a content creator. I'm a huge fan. I'm not sure if you've ever seen me talk about Better Call Saul, but it's like my favorite series. Or the whole Breaking Badiverse is something I really love. But I wanted to do at least one video on the 6th season of Better Call Saul. But I'm a little hesitant to do such because I'm not sure of the struggles. I see people on the one hand make content all the time regarding such, but on the other hand, I also see content creators, put so much time and effort into making such videos for the copyright holders. Oh, that's not fair use when something clearly is, and poof, all that work goes down the drain. So, as of now, I'm a bit on the fence about doing something like that.
It's When you get the hang of it, it's kind of easy, and I think that's another reason the specific format that I use works, because I suppose you could say, like, my model moving also kind of throws off the content ID system, but I also don't use too many snippets because it's like, I'm here to tell you about it, and I'm not here to watch you, like, show you the movie. You got Netflix, who doesn't? But it is pretty finicky, and I'd honestly say the hardest part was just if you had to make edits to it, I wouldn't do it in YouTube. I would do it in Filmora, which when I had my old laptop was a pain because it exported so slowly. Like a 15-minute video would take an hour and a half to export. Now it's not so bad. Now that I have like my gaming stuff set up, it's a lot easier. And it's just kind of like playing with what they do and don't claim. And even then, you still run into the issue of they claim stuff that's clearly fair use. Like I had Netflix claim a snippet of me, like not the content, not the episode I was talking about. It was literally a 15-second snippet of me with my gameplay. Because when I'm not showing clips, I have the gameplay on like the little TV. And I got claimed for me and my gameplay, and I was just like, what is this?
Ooh.
I fought it and I won, and I have beaten this thing every singular time. So if you need help going to bat, I will help you because I've won every time.
Well, I appreciate that. I really, really do. But yeah, so one of the things I like to do, and this is also something I really like about literature as well. I really like learning from those who've gone on before me, who have experience, with such matters. And so I really do appreciate your help. And well, back to the question I had first asked. Which book do you think was the most influential? I I really enjoyed that video you did about. Oh man, I'm sorry, the name escapes me, but it was
Help.
The Help. There we go. The Help. I really enjoyed that. I've never read the book. I heard about the movie, but I've never seen the movie, but I can really tell that you put a lot of heart and a lot of effort into making. I mean, you do that with all your videos, but especially you can feel it in that one, I would say. And I think based, if I just saw your video, I can tell it had a lot of personal value to you. But of course, now that we've had this conversation, I'm like, oh wow, yeah, this helped you get through a difficult time, so that kind of explains that. Now, another question, and if you don't feel like answering this one, please tell me and we'll skip it because this might be a bit uncomfortable. What was the most disturbing, unnerving, or uncomfortable thing you've ever read?
Yes. Okay. Here's the thing. The problem is I know the answer. And I'm still viscerally upset at the person who told me to read this book, but it's utterly disturbing, but at the same time it was probably one of my favorite books that I read last year, so much so that it's in my fave books of 2021 video. It's called Whore by Matt Shaw. And it's literally about a prostitute who kills her clients because a bunch of stuff happened to her as a kid. And I'm not going to dive into it, but you can kind of piece it together from there.
Oh. Oh, wow.
Oh yeah, it was heavy. Like, it was messed up. But at the same time, it was messed up, but I enjoyed it. It's kind of like the same feeling I get watching Criminal Minds. Like, it's messed up, but I like it here.
Wow, you know what? I would say the most disturbing thing I've ever read, I would be, probably doesn't even hold a candle to that. There's this piece of literature. It's called The Outcast of Poker Flats, and it's set in the Old West. And pretty much this town gets on its high horse and they decide, okay, we're going to be a more morally upstanding town, so all of you undesirables, you got to go somewhere else. You ain't got to go home, but you can't stay here, a type of mentality. And so they leave.
No.
And they're forced to travel from this town at the foot of the Rockies over the Rockies. Now, unfortunately, they get caught in a snowstorm. And so they're stuck there. They have to weather the storm. Now, while they're there, they're starting to run low on supplies. And
Oh no.
while they're asleep, one of the members, he decides, okay, I'm going to take what little supplies is left, and I'm going to leave by myself. And he does so, and pretty much leaving the others there to their fate. They don't resort to cannibalism or like the Donner Party did, but they essentially freeze to death. Unfortunately, but that was just one thing. And another one I would say would be it's called To Build a Fire. It's about Jack London, and very, very, very. A similar type of story. It's a survival type of story. This man, he's in Alaska. He's in the Yukon Territory, and he's on his way to meet his friends, like maybe 40, 50 miles away. He's walking through the snow. Now, it's very cold, like negative 60 degrees Fahrenheit. And, at that point in time, you shouldn't go out and you shouldn't go out alone, but this man does so anyway. And that type of situation is a situation where even if something small was to go wrong, it's life-threatening. Like, for example, if I was in North Carolina and I went out in the wintertime without my glove, okay, it's uncomfortable, but it's not going to kill me. There, you're probably going to lose your arms. You're probably going to lose your hands in that same situation in Alaska at that point in time. And so that's what happened to him. Slowly, he kept making these small mistakes. and his hands got frozen, the frostbitten. He could no longer move them, enough. So he had a dog companion, and he was always a jerk to the dog.
Oh no!
Always a jerk.
What? Okay, he deserved it. He deserved his hands getting frostbitten.
And so he starts to act all nice to the dog. But, dogs aren't stupid, Dogs are very intelligent animals. And he was like, nah, fam. Nah, we good here. We good. So he goes on about his business.
Nah, we good.
Yep. Yeah, and if you ever seen Star Wars, that's the scene where they're on the ice planet and they have to get inside the Tauntaun to survive.
Yeah.
That's where George Lucas got the idea from. Though.
Oh no.
But no, the dog was too smart for that. But so the dog didn't get hurt, but the man, he didn't make it out alive. I would say, and just that reality is kind of that life there, and how he lived. It was kind of shocking. I remember reading that in 11th grade, and it's also one of the reasons why I will never take my ass to Alaska.
And that's why I'm terrified of Alaska. Thank you.
Now, one of my other favorite books takes place in Alaska.
You know what's so funny? So does mine.
Oh, wow. What book is that?
It's called Frozen Stiff by an author called Patrick Logan. And he's the one that kind of got me back into like the whole loving crime psychological thriller type thing. And I believe that that first case took place in Alaska, and that kind of opened the whole multiverse of his books to me.
Now, I have to ask,
really
based on the title, Frozen Stiff, are there any erotic elements in that story?
No, he is strictly he's like a humorous crime author. Like it's like it like if you were to write the same level of messed up as Criminal Minds can get, but still adding that same level of humor that they sometimes have, it's very much that, and I think that's why I like it so much. But the thing is like, because I also like true crime, some of his books are also based off of real life ones, and I hate myself for being able to tell what cases he based these books off of. It's kind of messed up. But it's not erotic in the least. Like, his books are the strictly different type of messed up.
Now, you're not just a reader, though. You're not just somebody who enjoys literature, but you're a writer as well. So,
yeah.
I want to ask, was there a book that inspired you to pick up the pen?
See, that's a more complicated question. So, I think it was shortly before the world had shut down, I was complaining about a series of books. Like, not just a series, just like the last couple of books I read just weren't really hitting it for me. And I was complaining about it, and someone was like, well, I dare you to do better. And I was like, oh, don't you jest. And so I started it, and it ended up spiraling semi out of control, or in control, depending on how you look at it. But I ended up writing like 3 or 4 books over the course of the world being shut down. And now it's just a matter of polishing them up to put on Amazon. So it started out of me being petty, because books were bad, and I wanted to make them better.
What genres do you write?
Erotica.
All right, you have my attention. Now, I would say, I'm not a connoisseur of erotica by any means, though I'm always open to broaden my horizons. So I look forward to picking up one of your books one day.
I'm definitely nervous about outside people reading them, but I keep telling myself that if 50 Shades can get published and be successful, maybe there's hope.
I used to tell my friends in the film scene all the time. I used to tell them, at one point there was a meeting in the boardroom where somebody said, "Hey, listen, let's make a movie about a tornado made up of sharks." And lo and behold, they did it, and it was made. So, if that can happen, then your project can happen as well. Um, so so I think never let something discourage you from pursuing your passion. Um, we each have our own story to tell, and we each have a unique way of looking at the world and telling that story, or telling a story, I should say. So never get discouraged by that. Um, you know, I guarantee there's going to be at least one person that's going to pick up your book and they're going to fall in love with it. They're going to really enjoy it, and it's going to speak to them. And I think now this is my personal opinion, and this is just my opinion as a writer, as a creator, as an artist myself. If my work can have an impact on at least one person, and it can change them for the better, it can inspire them to take the writing to content creation, I feel like I've done a good job. You know, even if I never get a golden YouTube plaque while one of my books never sells 100 copies, I think I've done a good job. Um,
Yeah. And always at the very least you can say you tried.
because there's so many people who don't even make it that far. There's so many people who aren't even willing to try. And what has your experience been like trying to get your? Or I'm sorry, what has your experience been like trying to get your novels published?
Um, since I decided to go the self-publishing route because I've kind of heard horror stories about some publishers, and granted, I know it's not all publishers that are kind of sketchy, but I'd rather not take the risk. So I decided to go self-publish, which after I did that, I learned the process through Amazon, made the accounts, and it seems relatively easy once I have the manuscript done. I just have to figure out a cover at that point. So it seems to be an overall smooth process for the time being. The anxiety is going to happen when it's actually up and reviews start coming in and I'm going to lose my mind.
Is that something you plan on sharing with your followers in your VTubing career, or is that something you plan on keeping separate?
No. I'm definitely going to share it. I think I've talked and tweet about it enough. It would be kind of rude to be like, yeah, I did it, but you guys don't get to see it. And so I definitely think I am going to. I'm definitely going to do it. It's still in the me polishing it up, and then it's going to go to the test readers. And then when the test readers give it back to me, then I'm going to put it on Amazon once I've obviously made the appropriate edits and what have you. So, definitely going to do test readers first.
Would you ever like to pursue a career as an author?
I would love that. I really would. One of my favorite romance authors was like a corporate lawyer in New York or something. And then she when she got enough traction, she quit her job, moved into a cabin in the woods with her dogs and her husband, and I'm like, I want to live in a cabin in the woods with my dogs and just write all day. That's iconic. I want to do that. But obviously I'm not putting all my eggs in that basket. I'm remaining hopeful but realistic.
And lastly, I want to ask before we transition to the next subject, what is it exactly about writing that you like?
I think what I like the most about it is it gives me an outlet for my disassociative episodes, because I struggle really bad with disassociative episodes, and that's kind of more or less where the plots come from. It's like, so it's kind of making, I don't want to say disability because I don't think that's the right word, but it makes this thing that happens to me at least somewhat productive in my life. Because when I disassociate, I kind of like step away from reality for a little bit and live somewhere else for a while. And when I live in that other reality for a little while, it's kind of cool there. So I just decided to start writing those.
I tend to write on the one hand because, I find it cathartic myself. Usually when I have a lot of emotions, it helps me to express that. Like I remember I'm not really so much into writing fiction, though something I do write. The first time I wrote a fiction story was after I lost my job. After I lost a job, I should say, about 5 or 6 years ago, and it helped me to overcome that. It helped me to deal with that. Then I wrote another story once as well because I remember I had this really fucked up feeling. Before I married my wife, one of my roommates here was he was a major musician, a major rock star here, and a very popular rock band. And he's a really cool guy, really cool guy. He's kind of the guy that introduced me to my wife. And he sat me down. He said, "Man, sometimes, it's cool and everything, having everybody know your name and stuff, but you never know. You never know who genuinely likes you and who doesn't like you, who just wants to be close to you because they think they can get something out of you, fame, or they think they could get, your friendship would help them advance in their career, or they could get free stuff." He says, if I had any idea just how lonely this would be, maybe I would have never done this. And I remember walking away from that conversation that night, just feeling like, wow, that's pretty fucked up, man. That's because he's a really cool guy. He's a really great guy, really down to earth person. Like you would never know that he's somebody famous if you just looked at him and how he lived his life and stuff. And so I wrote a story based on him as well. And because as a writer, even though his story wasn't my story, I can kind of sympathize with people's feelings, to a very strong degree, to where I can imagine what it must be like as much as another person who's not there, who's not them could. And it really fucked with me for a long time. I was like, man, I got to write this. I got to put my pen to paper, and after that, I was like, okay, yeah, that feels much better. But this is something that that's one of the reasons I like it. Also, I love the world building as well.
Yeah.
And also I love how we could do certain things, because there's certain subtle tricks you can do with language that can convey certain ideas. All right. And now before we jump into VTubing, I have to ask, will we ever see a BlackChaiSenpai biography?
Oh, I feel like in some ways bits of my biography are sprinkled into what I've written so far, but I don't know if I could mentally or physically stomach writing my entire life out like that.
And if there was to be a movie made about your life, who would you like to see play you?
Maybe Zoe Kravitz. We're kind of the same color.
I think that's a good choice. I think that's a good choice.
Yeah.
I think that's a good choice.
Yeah, I'd say her. We're pretty much the same color.
Now, the big question I have to ask you now: why VTubing? There's so many outlets you could get into to be creative. Like, there's your writing, for example. You could get into singing. You can get into more traditional content creation. Why VTubing?
I always knew that I was never going to do face content, or I guess traditional content with like my face and stuff. I always knew that was never going to be an option for me. And if it wasn't the insecurity, it's the privacy matter of it all. Because, I never want anything I do to reflect poorly on anyone else in my family or anyone I might care about. So I originally did not start off as a VTuber. My first few videos, which they're private now, haha, I was simply faceless. I didn't start actually VTubing until like August.
And who are some of your favorite VTubers?
Well, you already know Gaia. I love her.
Oh, me too.
We watch Drag Race. She's so great. We watch Drag Race in her Discord on Fridays. I love it. So definitely Gaia. Um, I gotta say my friends, the ones that I talk to all the time, which is Scion Eon. He's a furry PNG tuber. Zalian Eclipse, who I love him so much. I talk to him every day. He's so funny. And Common, Uncommon, and Bikido. Bikido was big. Hold on, I gotta say this slowly because I mess it up every time. Bikido Gagne is the first VTuber friend I ever made, period. You were the second, but he was the first. So he's been around since I had my first model, which was a nightmare. And you two have always remained the real ones, but Bikido was there first. And it's weird to think that it's been almost a year.
Time does fly, doesn't it? Time does fly.
It does.
I never knew I was your second. I never knew that, actually. You were one of the first ones I made, or one of my first mutuals, I should say, in regards to Twitter. And I'm really you're somebody who I put a lot of value in, a lot of trust in, and somebody I enjoy talking to. I really love your view on things, I would say.
Oh, thank you.
And I think I would definitely have to say Gaia is definitely one of my favorites as well. Actually, I had her own.
Great.
I had her own a couple months ago, but unfortunately, due to technical issues, we couldn't use that interview. Unfortunately, so that's one of the reasons why I had to take that long break from doing these coffees with Big Mike episodes. Now, I have to ask, out of the whole VTubing world, do you have a husbando or waifu?
No, I don't. But what I can say is I do have a Derek Morgan to my Penelope Garcia. Because like I always say like that's my limit for me is like what they have, that's my limit. And Uncommon, he's the best at playing. He's the best at playing off that banter with me in my Twitch chat, my tweets, just everywhere. So I'd probably say Uncommon. Yeah.
And would it be fair to say that he is the VTuber that has left the biggest impact on you, or would it be another VTuber?
I'm gonna circle back and say the VTuber that left the biggest impact on me was Gaia. And I think I tuned into one of her streams drunk one night. I was drunk and acting a fool in her chat. I think she did a Halloween stream, and the rest was history for us.
I remember that.
Like, I don't know what I was doing. I was just like, I had a bottle of wine and some time to kill. Let's see what happens. So, it just never stopped with us. Like, she has, like, the level of confidence that, like, she's basically, Gaia is what I want to be when I grow up. It's just that. It's pretty much that.
One day I want to have both of you on at the same time, and that's the dream for me. That would be a dream for me. We'll talk a bit more about that later.
Let's do it.
Now, some people approach people approach VTubing differently. Some people play a character, and others prefer to be themselves. What would you say your approach is?
This is me. I am this much of a lunatic librarian in real life as well. It's just me.
I would describe myself in a very similar way. If anything, I would say maybe I'm slightly more toned down online than I am in real life. Simply because I don't want to get banned. I don't want to get banned off of Twitter or YouTube, because my mind tends to live in the gutter. So I have to be very careful. I have to censor myself, because I know it's very low hanging fruit, but sexual humor tends to be my forte, and so I have to be very careful with what I say, with what I do. But I digress. So, now, what was your first weeks like as a VTuber?
A struggle, because I didn't know really what a VTuber was. I really didn't know. So when I found out what it was, I was like, oh, that sounds kind of cool. I would like to do that because, again, traditional content was never going to be what I was going to do. And I was like, it seems more interesting than just me talking. So I looked into it, and I made the very, very silly mistake I opened Vroid, and I was like, this is too hard. I bet 2D is easier to do myself, and I now know that is a bold-faced lie. So I made my model myself using Vroid. I've made them all myself, but it was a struggle because I knew it was something I wanted to do. Getting the first model out and then just consistently improving until I got to the point where I now have a different outfit every video because I'm extra. But it's starting off as a struggle.
And are you satisfied with how things went? If you had the chance to go back in time and to pay somebody to make a model for you, would you have done that, or would you have stayed the course?
I would have stayed the course. It's not that I don't like paying for help, because I see these models, I see the work and effort that goes into them, and I fully accept that is something I will never be able to do. At the same time, though, even though my model isn't as intricate as others, I kind of have this pride that I made this, I like this. And with all my different outfits and stuff, it's kind of like, I made this, I'm proud of it. So I definitely would have, if I had to have gone through the headache again, I think the one thing I would change is figuring out how to do hair earlier on. That would have been it. Other than that, nah, I'm good.
I really love that, actually. I love that story. I love that answer because, I'm really big on self-reliance as much as possible. It's a really big value for me. And I think, it's much more meaningful. It's much more meaningful when we can do stuff on ourselves. And it makes our success, much more meaningful as well. There's an old saying, no berries taste as sweet as those we pick ourselves. And I have a great deal of respect for anybody. And not to knock anybody who gets anything commissioned at all, because, I'll be the first to admit when the time comes for me to become a VTuber, a full and proper VTuber, I'm definitely getting mine made. Yeah, I used to be very big into art, but unfortunately I gave up on it when I was in high school to focus more on my writing. And I wish I don't regret focusing more on my writing, but I do regret, giving up art. And so I'll be the first to admit I'm definitely going to not live up to my own expectations, my own ideals, I would say. But it's still, for those who choose to go that self route, I have a great deal of respect for. Now, what do you think has been your best moment as a VTuber so far?
My friends. My friends that I've made in the last less than a year have been insane. Like, I have people I talk to every day. I have people that I work with that I love. Like, I can genuinely say I love them because they... Well, first of all, they haven't just up and abandoned me because I can be kind of a head case 99% of the time. It's just, I think it's just the meeting people because I'm not overtly social face to face. I can't do that. So, but this I can do. So it's given me friends that I don't really have a lot of, or didn't have a lot of beforehand.
I would honestly say that's actually what keeps me going myself, actually. I probably would have hung things up a long time ago if it wasn't for my friends in the VTube and indie game communities, respectively. They kind of what keep me going. As a father, I juggle many responsibilities and work and recently I've had some health issues, and so it's kind of tempting. Okay, just hang it up, Michael. Just give up. And I'm like, nah, fuck that. I can't do that. I made so many friends in the community, man. I just couldn't walk away from it.
Yeah.
And so I definitely get where you're coming from, and I try to keep that in mind. Whenever you're gonna have a bad day. Everybody has bad days. Everybody has bad time periods. But it's good to keep something like that in mind to help you get through. I remember something important. My ethics professor told me when I was in university. We were discussing the book Night by Elie Wiesel. Great book. Hard book to read, but it's a good book. But it's a great book, I would say, if you ever get the chance to read it. I'm not sure if you ever read it or not.
Would you care for a Big Mike exclusive?
Sure.
It's related, I promise.
Sure.
So, I think... So, in one of my school-assigned reading videos, I mentioned a book that I refuse to talk about ever again because of how upset it made me. That was it.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What was it? What was it about the book that... I know the setting, the time period. I know it's very horrible. It's literally the worst. Like, it's up there with the worst atrocities committed. But was it just the overall setting, or was there something particular about it that kind of turned you off?
I think it was just a combination of everything plus, oh God, what grade was that? 10th grade? Also, I wasn't very good mentally in the 10th grade, so I think all those things culminated in I want nothing to do with this book ever again. I took my B- on that essay and never looked back.
I remember we discussed it in my ethics class when I was a sophomore in university. But when I was give me just a moment. When I was a senior in university in my Intro to Judaism class, we actually had to write an essay on it, discussing it, outlining it, giving our thoughts on it, and using the book and that event that's a set-in to either support our reason or for either the existence of God or the non-existence of God. And it was a difficult experience. I would say it was a very, very difficult experience. But the author, he said, who lived through it and he survived. He said that when you're going through something like that, you don't just need a will to survive. You need a reason, and to kind of keep your head facing forward to get you through it. And so, in short, that's kind of that. My friends are they kind of that carrot on the stick, so to speak. But I had no idea. I wasn't even thinking about that book. I was like, I had no idea that was even. Wow, I had no idea Well,
I've never looked back. I couldn't do it, man.
phew, it was a hard it was a really hard one. It was a really that was a really hard
Mm.
part of my university career. Because at that same time, because well, the my ethics class wasn't really. It was just talked about in brief. But with my intro to Judaism class, it was we actually got to meet some survivors of that event, and they told their stories to go along with it. And whew,
I've lost my mind.
I think it's important. It's important that people know about it, and I think it's important to learn to study. Because there's a famous historian, I forget his name, but he said, "He who forgets the past is only doomed to repeat it." And
Oh yeah.
there are similar atrocities going on around the world today. Maybe not in as big a fashion, but I think it's something that that needs to be taught, even if it's not easy. But still, it's something that's not easy to process. And I remember just sitting through that, listening to those people talk about their experiences, and just tears just rolling down my eye, I mean, my face, and I couldn't do it. I remember going back to my dorm and just fucking bawling my eyes out. Man, whew.
Yeah, no, I get that. I would not have been able to emotionally handle that. Like, I agree, it's absolutely important. I just also know that I am a very sensitive person. Like, I am a crybaby. Oh, Lordy, I don't know. I would not have been able to handle that one.
You know, that's well, that was one of the things I really loved about my major. I mean, not that particular instant, but being a philosophy and religion major, have yourself challenged like that. Like in my intro to philosophy class, I had to write a paper on the problem of evil, and another very a closely related topic, and philosophy theology, but a very heavy one as well. And so I kind of like because it kind of challenges you as a person to grow, to kind of see the world differently. But on the other hand, it will fuck with you very hard,
Oh
very
yeah.
hard. Especially when you deal with stuff in real life. One thing that kind of hit me. It's one thing to say, okay, well, this happens because of that, in theory, but to actually be in practice, you go visit hospitals, go visit the homeless. It's a whole different situation. It's a whole different situation to experience it firsthand. And, whew, but I digress. I would say now I I guess maybe this might be a good time to bring this up, and it's a bit of a sensitive topic. So so if you don't feel comfortable with this, please let me know, and we'll move on to the next section. You are, you are a good friend of mine. You're a guest, and the last thing I ever want you to do is to feel uncomfortable on my show. Um, but as a person of color, have you faced any issues as a VTuber that maybe non-people of color don't have to face?
Not directly. I've seen it. I've seen, you know, the exposed tweets for people who have directed that kind of hate towards other VTubers, but it's never been directed towards me, and I'm, fingers crossed, knocking on wood that it doesn't, because I deal with it enough in my day-to-day life that I'm not in any type of mood to deal with it in my VTubing life. So it's there, it exists. I'm just very fortunate that it hasn't happened to me. I just think that I've closed myself off in this niche little bubble that things like that haven't touched me yet. I mean, other bad things have, but this hasn't yet, and still hoping it doesn't.
Have you ever received any unsolicited pics before?
I have, oh, sorry, unsolicited pics.
Okay, I see. How can I put this politely? Have you ever received any unsolicited pictures of male anatomy? Or I guess,
No, I haven't. I have had people bring their overly descriptive fantasies about my models into my DMs, which I've stated several times I do not like, and still get them.
I promise you, I won't overshare my fantasies of your model, but I will say she is very sexy.
Thank you. It's just, I don't care if that's how you feel. It's if I explicitly say that, keep it like keep that in your head. Don't bring that to me directly. It's weird.
And oh, you mean the fantasies about your model, right? Your fantasies about your model.
Yeah.
Okay. So now compliments like sexy, your model sexy, they don't make you feel uncomfortable, do they?
No, no,
Okay.
that's perfectly fine. I'm talking like I've had people say stuff along the lines of this is what I picture you do while you reading
Oh,
and yeah,
oh wow.
or or I'll complain that I'm tired from working and then editing and they'll be like, "Well, this is what I do if I was there and you were stressed out." And I'm like, after explicitly stating, in both tweet form and every person who DMs me kind of gets the same message of this is the line, don't cross it, and it still gets crossed.
Yeah, I think boundaries are a major issue, or a major issue that people have in the VTubing community. Or I wouldn't say VTubers. Well, I guess
Absolutely.
sometimes VTubers themselves, but a lot of fans as well. And part of me wonders if that's because of the anonymity of the internet or the VTubing venture as a whole, or if it's a part of the parasocial relationship thing. I'm not quite sure myself, but it's an issue. It's an issue. I would say many
Oh
people
yeah.
face. Now, you're a VTuber and you are a Lewd Librarian. Would you consider yourself to be a LewTuber?
Yes, I do, but I don't consider myself on like the same level as like Gaia is yet. It's just I feel like it's more of like just like an umbrella term more or less for the I guess it's like I think it's more of like an umbrella term. Like I don't think you have to do the VTubing chatterbait or the VTubing like stuff like she does to be considered a LewTuber. I think it's a very broad statement for someone who makes more adult level content, which is what I do and what I plan to keep doing. I'm not for children, and I will keep screaming that from the rooftops that I'm not. So I would consider myself one, but I'm not a different type, I guess is the right wording for it.
I describe myself kind of similarly. I say to people, or I tell people, you're never gonna, you're never gonna see my junk on my Twitter or or in a video. I'm never gonna make an adult movie, at least starring myself. Um, but at the other side of the coin, this isn't PBS. This isn't Nick Jr. I'm not. You're not going to want your kids to watch this. I'm like a Kevin Smith movie or an, Adult Swim or an episode of South Park. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I get it totally. It's just it's a broad term. It's a broad term and there's different types of LewTubers.
And now, what qualities or skills or talents do you think a VTuber should possess?
Hmm. I think the ability to not give a fuck kind of comes in handy a little bit. I say that because if you hyperfixate on like numbers or comparing yourself to others, you're going to be miserable. You have to have a certain level of not giving a shit that, you may not be doing as well as others, which, which, when you tweet about reaching a milestone soon, that's one thing, but it's just like when you're hyper, like absolutely fixated on the numbers, it gets a little, I feel like that just takes all the fun out of it. Like, you need to be able to do this and still have fun. You need to not turn it so much into work, because granted, a lot of people do this because they want to make it a career, and that's fine. But if you get so sucked into it that it starts to feel like going to work every day, then what's the point? Because if you're not having fun, the people that are immersed in your content are going to see you're not having fun either. And I also think you need to have some level of individuality. Like, you need to stay yourself. Don't try to be what you think people want you to be, I suppose would probably be a good way to say it. It's like, I don't think you should tailor yourself to try to get the numbers. I'm just a lunatic to be a lunatic, and I've accepted my fate wherever that puts me in this VTubing realm. Because I do this for fun. Would it be nice to make this my career or what have you? Yeah, it would be great, but I feel like hyper fixating on things like that isn't the best way to go about it. And I mean, maybe that's just me, because even in the VTubing realm, I feel like I'm pretty niche. Like, I've met other librarian VTubers, and I love when that happens. I really do. But I feel like the librarian community and the VTuber community is so small and niche that I don't really care, because there might not be a lot of people interested in what I do. So I think I've just accepted my fate.
I agree with that philosophy, actually. I agree with that philosophy 110%. A lot of times I tell people are the very same things, be yourself. There's only one you. Nobody else, can share vision like you share. Nobody else have your very same experiences, your perspectives. And there's only one you, so be you. On the other hand, I tell people, do what you love. Do it because you love it. Don't let it bog you down. Don't let it become, like a job. Otherwise, I see a lot of YouTubers get burnt out. They suffer burnt out, and other things can burn you out as well. Like I'll be the first to admit sometimes I feel burnt out myself. Not so much because of my content creation work, but just all the other stuff I have going on in my life. But I've never really felt burnt out because of content creation. I've never really oh man, I gotta go do this video today, or I gotta go, make this post today. I've never felt like that. But, not like with my, with some of the actual jobs I worked, in my life, where, damn it, I gotta be at work today at 4, or I gotta go to practice today at 2, and it's, that will show, like you said, that will show in your content, unfortunately. And so I tell people, do what you love. And when it comes to VTubing, well, not just VTubing, but content creation in general, you can do anything. Pretty much nothing is off the table. Their platforms cater to adult content. If that's your thing, they're more general, content sites like YouTube, Twitch. I've seen VTubers teach coding. A popular thing now is for VTubers to do, cooking. I even remember back, I want to say October, November 2021, I saw something about a VTuber teaching carpentry. I
would tune into that just for the sheer curiosity of it.
And so nothing is off the table, and it's only going to improve with time. I myself, I'd love to kind of work some more literature stuff into my content. Still, You kind of give me something to think about here, actually. I have a lot of interest in literature, and this is actually one of the reasons why I enjoy doing these conversations, because not only do I enjoy making content, but I love having, I love exchanging ideas, exchanging, experiences, because I always walk away from these situations with more than what I came in with, I would say. So you've given me something to think about here.
Oh yeah, I accomplished something.
Now, many people invest
Yeah.
hundreds, if not thousands of dollars, weeks, months of their lives, as well as an immeasurable amount of effort into becoming a VTuber. Unfortunately, for them, so some of them at least, they never see anything in return, whether it be fans or financial gain. Now, with this in mind, do you think VTubing is worth it? And if so, what makes it worthwhile for BlackChaiSenpai?
I think it is still absolutely worth it because, again, if you're having fun doing what you're doing, who ultimately cares? Because, like, if you enjoy doing something and you put it out into the world, like, and you're proud of it, that's a dub right there, my dude. Like, that's a win. That's a straight win for you off jump.
Amen to that.
And it's just like, and I feel like if you go into it expecting hordes of fans and financial gain off jump, I feel like you're just kind of setting yourself up for disappointment. Because it's just like, whether we like it to admit it or not, it's kind of like the VTuber market's kind of boomed, I guess, is kind of what I've heard. Because again, I didn't know what a VTuber was this time last year. But I think that, the market is so big. You can't go into it expecting to like be the next, oh god, what's her name? I'm gonna say Project Melody because I know she's a big one. So it's just like if you go into it expecting to have fun and make friends, and if you do get that success and financial gain along the way, I feel like those are just bonuses. But if that's your end goal from the jump, as opposed to just, trying to be a content creator and putting what you feel is a piece of you into the world, I mean, I feel like that's just the better way to think of it. Because I don't get a lot of views on my YouTube videos, but I put in work and time and effort into those. And whether or not people watch them, I'm proud. I'm still proud that I did it. No one can take that away from me. And I feel like that's a mindset that more people should have.
I agree. I agree with that 100%, I would say. I want to ask you two questions. And I want to ask you these two questions because, you and I both, we're on the smaller side of content creation. We're not the size of Project Melody. We're not the size of PewDiePie. We're not the size of any of the big content creators or streamers. So our perspectives are going to be different from those people if you were to ask them these questions.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what do you think about the VTuber community, and do you think they've been supportive?
Supportive of me, yes, I do think so. Because I like I said, I feel like I've made genuine friends along the way, and I'm not even a year into this. And in terms of the VTuber community as a whole, it feels like it depends on what day it is. So what I keep telling people is I've purposefully, like this is 100% intentional, put myself in a bubble. Because I did not start VTubing to be involved in or, do anything involved with some of the drama that does happen in the community. So I 100% put myself in this little sector where I feel like I'm more or less safe from that. And again, one, I do it because I don't want to be involved, but two, I do it because I cannot mentally handle some of the stuff that goes on. Like, I know the limits of my anxiety and what I can and can't handle. And even though it's not happening to me directly, I feel like all of us get some sort of secondhand anxiety when something hits kind of close to home, like with the VTuber community. So I just elect to stay away from that. I stay in my little protection bubble. And inside of my protection bubble, I love it here.
I try my best to keep my distance from drama as well. Though one thing I do try to do as I've gotten bigger, and mind you, I don't think I'm big by any stretch of the imagination. But I'm considerably bigger than when I first started back in August, September of 2021. Is that I try to stand up for smaller accounts, especially when I feel like they're being taken advantage of. So I try to do stuff like that, but as far as a lot of the major heavy stuff, I try not to get involved with it. I get drained really easy. I get drained. I get emotionally drained really easy. Um, remember how early in the conversation I told you, I can feel, I can kind of feel what other people feel. When I was telling you about my friend who was in the band,
Hmm.
and that's a very real thing for me. And it often when I go through that, I feel emotionally drained after that. So I tend to try to avoid heavy situations like that if I can. Um, Though if it's absolutely necessary, if I need somebody needs to be stood up for, I'm not gonna let that person stay there by themselves. If there's something I can do, but if it's just like drama that's going around, like this big VTuber did this or did that, I try to avoid stuff like that. The older I get, and the older I realize that, the more I realize that a lot of this stuff tends to go in cycles. So if you see some major drama happen, in the community, chances are, in 2 to 6 months, that same exact drama is going to happen again. Maybe different people involved, different setting, but the story is essentially the same. So I realized I probably should keep my distance from that, I would say.
Yeah, no, I completely understand. It's just it's so it is so emotionally exhausting. And in some ways it can be extremely triggering as well. Another reason I try to stay away from all of it, it's like I know my triggers. I don't expect the internet to be tailored to my triggers in any sense. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say I'm trying to tailor my experience on the internet to avoid my triggers as much as humanly possible. I know that doesn't always happen, but that's what I try to do. Like some of the stuff that can happen can trigger me, and then I'm just gonna be like in a heap on the floor crying for 3 days. And obviously, that's not something I want to do. So I just stay in the sanctum that is my library with my cats and my books, and I'm just gonna stay here forever. Like I said, I've accepted my fate wherever that puts me in this realm.
I believe it was either Cercio or Seneca. He said that if you have a library and a garden, then you have everything you need for life. Um, so I think that sounds like a great plan. And I think it's a very mature way of looking at things too. Um, I think it's a very mature way of looking at things, and one I have a great deal of respect for. Um, Now, the second question I wanted to ask you in regards to this, if there was anything you could change about the community, what would you like to change and why?
I just wish that stuff like that didn't happen. Like some really awful shit has happened, and I wish it didn't. But I guess that's not necessarily exclusively to the VTubing community. The internet as a whole is kind of a shit show. And I just kind of wish everyone would just take a step back and just like trolls stop being trolls. Like, I just kind of wish everyone would just be kind of nice to each other. I know that's like a really stupid, like, self-help book answer. I just kind of wish we would all just be nice to each other.
Actually, I don't think that's unreasonable at all. Actually, I think that's a very realistic and a very mature way. It's a very real desire, I think. What's unfortunate is there are immature people who can't live up to that ideal. That's the tragedy, unfortunately. But I would say there's nothing wrong with that at all, actually. There's nothing wrong with wanting the internet to be like that. And I would... One thing I do like to point out, having lived on both sides of the Pacific, having studied different cultures, different history, different religions, is that there's no one group that has a monopoly on being shit. There's no,
Yeah.
there are good people and there are bad people, in every community you go to, unfortunately. And with the internet, and this is actually really chilling to think about. There was an experiment done some years ago at a university. There were two groups of people. One person, in both sets, there was a person standing outside of the room looking in, and the inside of each of these rooms were people. Now, in group A, the people in the room could see the person outside looking in. And in group B, the people could not see the person. And so each of the people standing outside were given a button. And they were told that if you press this button, it will shock the people on the inside. Now, the person who knew the people couldn't see them pressed the button. And the person who did not know, or the person who knew the people could see them, did not press the button. And many people had likened this experiment to the internet and the anonymity it gives us. Unfortunately, a lot of people tend to use this anonymity to be dicks to one another, unfortunately. But much like yourself, I believe we're capable of much more than that. And perhaps as time progresses, because relatively speaking, the internet is still very much in its infancy. I believe, we haven't reached its, much of its potential yet. And I think as time progresses, there's at least a possibility that, things will get better. No.
I hope so.
Now let's say there's somebody out there watching this video. And, maybe they dislike you, or maybe they even dislike the VTuber community as a whole. What is something you would like them to know?
In terms of disliking me personally, fair. No, but it's like, I don't expect everyone to like me. I know I can be quite annoying at times. I know I'm not perfect. I know I have flaws. I know there are going to be people out there who do not like me. As long as you're not an asshole about not liking me, I don't particularly care. So, but in terms of the VTuber community as a whole, I guess it depends on where you plopped in on it at. It's just kind of like one of those things where, depending on when and where you decided to dabble into the community, your opinion might be justified. But if you just don't like VTubers because you think the concept as a whole is stupid, well, you're stupid. It's just, I don't know. I guess I can't really say much. It's like, if you don't like VTubers because they're VTubers, well, I doubt I'm gonna change your mind. I'm the last person that's gonna be changing anyone's mind about VTubers. It's just it kind of plays into that. You kind of have to have the ability to not give a fuck sometimes. People aren't gonna like you because you're a VTuber. People aren't gonna like you because of the stuff you do. It is what it is.
As one piece of advice, somebody I met in my life, he gave me. He said, the caravan doesn't stop for the barking of dogs. And essentially, people are going to criticize you. People are going to criticize you on what you're doing, no matter what you do. And no matter what you do, you're never going to be able to please 100% of the people, and that's okay. Keep doing you. As long as you feel like you're doing the right thing, keep on doing you. And that's something I try to embody in my work. And I think that's the answer you gave is a very realistic one. One person likely isn't going to change somebody's mind. If they don't like something as a whole. Also, I don't think there's a problem with not liking VTubers. Now, I think it becomes a problem when you feel the need to tell VTubers, to go out of your way and tell them, hey, I don't like VTubers. Like, that's just kind of a dickish thing, in my opinion.
Yeah. You're entitled to not like something. Just don't be an asshole about it.
No. Let's say there's someone out there watching this video and they want to be a VTuber. What advice could you offer such a person?
Stop giving a fuck. Oh, that's going to be my cop out for a while. Yeah, no, it's just I mean, like, in the grand scheme of things, you're more or less going to have a tough skin. Like, I'm a crybaby. I've had things that have happened to me in my VTuber journey that have whole made me cry, but you still have to have some semblance of a thick skin to do this, and you have to learn to stop caring about literally everything. Like, you just have to push through it, because no one is successful from the jump. And again, if you go into that mindset expecting success, you're just setting yourself up for disappointment. I went into this because I wanted to complain about how Netflix originals were going down the toilet. Like, they are, by the way. Ooh. And it's just I feel like you just need to have some sort of fun with it. If you need help, there are really wonderful people out there who are willing to help you. Like, the people that... if you tweet that you need help with something, you slap a VTuber tag on there, bro, they will come to the rescue. And I love that. So, you just have to not be afraid to ask for help. Stop giving a fuck about the minuscule things and just have fun with it. And maybe invest in some Excedrin if you decide to make your own model. I had a migraine or two trying to build mine.
Ooh, man. I don't really get migraines so much, unlike some other people in my family. But I get a lot of tension headaches, and so I keep some special tension headache pain medicine at my desk for that. But I will say, just to add to what you said, I do believe the VTuber community can be very uplifting. It can be very nice when it comes to offering help. And I've been fortunate enough to be a part of that community, as well as the indie game dev community, which is very similar in that regards.
Oh, yeah. It's just I think I made a tweet. I said, how do make VTuber friends? And then you and Bickito just came to the rescue. And it just kind of snowballed from there. It's just when the community is good, oh, Barbara, it's good. And I think the bad things that happen shouldn't overshadow the good either. I feel like we should also be talking about the good things that happen too.
Amen to that. Amen to that 110%. And I believe one of the kind of fucked up things about media and human nature in general is that we tend to focus more on the bad than we do the good. Somebody does something really bad, that's going to be on page 1 of the newspaper. People even still read newspapers. Whereas somebody does something good, help out a charity or, work at a soup kitchen, that's going to be way back in some section of the newspaper, if it even makes the newspaper at all. And I think that's just kind of one of our shortcomings as a species, unfortunately. Not really sure why that is, why bad news sells so much, unfortunately. But I think it's something that we can break, but it's something we have to get enough people together to break that. But I want to touch on something you said previously. You said Netflix, the decline of Netflix originals. Now, this is going to be a controversial.
Yeah.
This is going to be a controversial opinion, but it's something I feel pretty damn passionate about. Netflix started to go downhill the moment it canceled BoJack Horseman.
That's valid. That's absolutely valid. Because, I mean, like, Netflix originals have taken some of the most, oh my god, triggering pieces of media and decided to make content out of it. Like, I promise you, I don't need a 2-hour movie of Netflix trying to convince me that an Italian man kidnapping this Polish woman is a good thing. I don't need that. I don't need 8 episodes of this woman pseudo cheating on her husband. Like, it's insane. It is. But yeah, no, you're totally valid. Netflix originals are weird. But then they also make like Castlevania and Stranger Things. So it's like, it's really hot and cold with them. But these Netflix romance originals can just stop immediately.
It seems very much to be a hit and miss type of thing with them. It's like somebody, this content creator I watched, he brought up the point that sometimes it seems like, if you take a film project or a series pilot to Netflix, they'll greenlight it like almost automatically. Like there's almost no content control or no quality control, and I think unfortunately with Netflix, because they were the biggest dogs in the yard for so long, or the only dogs in the yard for so long, but now the landscape has changed with so many streaming platforms, like Disney Plus, HBO Max, Hulu, so they can't really do that anymore, and so their chickens are starting to come home to roost, I think.
Yeah, and I think that was, honest to God, my biggest motivation when I started making videos was I want to complain, and even if no one hears me, someone's gonna hear me. Like, I just didn't. I dislike the romanticization of super duper toxic male leads. Like, I guess that's just me. Like, the Christian Greys of the romance genre make me volatile, and I feel the need to say something about it.
Like, for me, I can kind of... I don't... to a certain extent, it's something I can kind... But I guess it depends on what kind of toxicity we're talking about. Like, if it's, say, for example, just... let's say, I don't know if you ever heard of that game, Postal.
Yes.
Or I'm not the only one to bring up the name of the other game, but there's a famous game done in NES style graphics about a certain high school tragedy in the late '90s. Yeah. So
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So. Anyway, something like that, yeah, definitely. I couldn't get behind that. Somebody who just goes in and wipes out a bunch of people for no apparent reason. But let's say it's something, like The Punisher, for example. I don't have a problem with something like that, because he, it shows, this is a person. He's the way he is, and he's the way he is.
He's definitely more anti-hero.
Yeah. But he also he himself believes that he's not somebody you should emulate. Like at one point in the comics, a group of police, start wearing stickers of the Punisher skull. And this is a sort of a meta real world critique, as I'm sure you've probably seen this on some groups in real life in the United States. He said he despises people looking up to him. He took off the sticker, tore it up, and said, if I ever see this on you again, you're going to wish I had it. And so I can get behind something like that, but somebody being toxic just for the sake of being toxic. Like another great example, BoJack Horseman. He's a pretty... have you ever seen BoJack?
I've seen a little bit of it. It's a lot heavier than the outrageous characters make it seem.
he's a toxic person.
Oh yeah.
He doesn't. I don't think he necessarily means to be toxic, but he is, and it's part of that. He does make his own choices, but also he's, he came from a toxic mother who came from a toxic family. So you see the whole cycle of toxicity there. So something like that, I don't really mind. I don't really mind that per se, because you see the inner workings of it. You know, this is not somebody to emulate. This is not somebody to look up to. But as far as glamorizing it, fuck that. I don't like that.
Oh, yeah.
I don't like that.
Like I see a lot of wishing a lot of people wishing like their partners were more like Christian Grey, and I'm like, why? And then when 365 Days came out, it got even worse. Like, it's so bad that my video is 36 minutes long on it. Like, it's just me complaining. It's just, I don't particularly care, because dark romances are whatever. Not my cup of tea, but whatever. But if you start to romanticize and think that the type of relationships portrayed in these books are normal and healthy, that's when I start to have a problem.
I used to see, I'm not sure if it's still so common anymore, because, I don't really have a lot of free time anymore, but I knew there was a certain time where so many people used to romanticize the relationship between Joker and Harley Quinn. And
it's literally that. And
I'm like, dude, no, like, that's toxic as fuck, but people, I don't know, man. I really, sometimes I scratch my head when I look at people. I would say, I've told people this many times before, the older I get, the less sometimes I feel like I understand my fellow man. The last question I want to ask you, though, is...
What?
Well, I guess the last personal question I want to ask you is, what does the future look like for you?
Probably a lot more of the same. My book videos are... my writing is my number one priority, where I'm also still working on my book videos and, streaming when I can. And it's just, I have so much going on, and I'm very grateful for it. It's just more of the same, hopefully just more organized. I think that I'm hoping for just more organization, because I'm currently working on a lot. I'm also working on lore writing for other people, my book writing, my videos, and my streaming. A lot more of that. Just, hopefully I get better time management skills.
I would say being a content creator is also being a juggler as well. You got to juggle so many things, and time management is a really big aspect of that. Sometimes it's like as a parent, I know I can only record at certain times. That's why my content may seem a little slow coming out. I know I can only record audio at certain times. But when there are times that I can't record audio, I try to do other things like writing scripts or editing or promoting myself on social media, etc. So it's a huge juggling act. And somehow I like to say it's organized chaos. Because somehow it's chaotic, it's completely disorganized, but in the end, it kind of all works out. Or at least I hope it does. At least.
All I'm hoping for is some better time management skills.
You and me both.
Yeah, no.
You and me both. I tell you what, that's something I wish. That's something I want to try to do more of myself, or be better at myself, I would say. Yeah. And so, I want to ask you before we go. Do you have any questions for me, or anything you'd like to add?
I don't think so. I think we've had a really interesting conversation, I feel.
This has been one of my more exciting conversations, and not just because it was my first one back, although that certainly did add a lot to it as well. But, I don't get a chance to discuss literature very often, and it's something I really do enjoy. It's something I really do enjoy to talk about. And it's something, I feel like you and I, we have a lot of, not the same experiences, but we have some similar experiences, some similar outlooks on life, I would say. So I would say it's been a great pleasure to talk to you and to exchange ideas and thoughts. Thank you so much, BlackChaiSenpai, for joining us and for everything she's done to help me. Alright, guys, gals, non-binary pals, and waterfowls, thank you so much for joining us as well. Be sure to check out BlackChaiSenpai on Twitch, YouTube, and Twitter at the links below. And if you would like to support her but can't donate to her Kofi, please be sure to give her a follow. Following VTubers is a great way to support them. Also, special thanks to Fran, who does a wonderful job doing my art. A special thanks to all of my friends on Twitter. I wouldn't be here without you all. And most importantly, a special thank you to all of you for watching. Please like this video if you liked it. Dislike it if you dislike it. Feel free to comment below and let me know what you think. If you like my content, please subscribe and turn your notifications on. Until next time, fam, peace out!